for a change is when something outside of you kind of forces you out of a comfortable position. I hear this all the time when I would conduct interviews as a recruiter, as a hiring manager, and I would ask people that question, why did you leave your last job? Or why are you looking to leave your current job? And a lot of people would answer with push reasons. They'd say that they were getting laid off, or they'd say, maybe they were even saying a safer answer like, oh, it wasn't performance based, but it's seasonal and they pushed everybody out or something like that. But the point of that answer is you're talking about why you left, not why you want to do something else. You're basically telling a story that says, if some outside factor didn't make me leave, I wouldn't leave. Maybe my company shut down due to COVID-19. Well, that's a safe answer in terms of it doesn't reflect poorly on you, but it also doesn't show any sort of real desire to do anything else. It doesn't create a story that pulls you towards the next thing. A pull reason is you leaving willingly. Nobody pushed you out. There was no reason you had to go except you wanted something else. So a better answer for why you want to go from one thing to a new thing is because something about the new thing is compelling, because there is some satisfaction you can gain there that you couldn't get where you are, because there's some ambition you can't fulfill in your current environment. So think about this. We were just chatting a little bit in the beginning about the sort of standard story of people getting burnout in a really corporate environment, maybe a very micromanaged environment. And so they have to get out. That's a push reason. The push reason is this environment is stifling. This environment is really negative. I don't like it. I have to get out. Push reasons aren't directional, because the point of a push story is I just had to get out of there. It doesn't matter what I do next. I just had to get out of there. But when that happens, that's when people go out of the frying pan into the fire. That's when people are saying, I just got to get out of there. I got to do anything except this. And they don't give a lot of intentional thought to what they want to do next, because they're so focused on what's behind them that then they end up maybe stumbling from one thing to another. It's not really better. It's lateral. Sometimes it's even downward. That's the problem with push reasons. If you want to leave, if you want to change, you have to have a solid thing pulling you. And you have to be prepared to talk about that, because if you've done 15 years in one industry and you start looking for roles in a new industry, the people you interact with in that new industry will want to know. Let's say, hey, why do you suddenly want to switch from medical device sales to talent development and professional coaching? And if my answer was just, well, I hate medical device sales now, or you know what, it keeps me over the road, so I'm just looking for anything that lets me stay at home, not really compelling, right? Instead, you have to talk about what you want to do in the new space. What do you want to do specifically here? Not just generic things, not just, I want to do something different. What do you want to do here? There is a why. There is something you want to do. And many, many people make the mistake of starting the switch before they've thought about that, before they've been honest with themselves about what they really want to do. Maybe they're scared to niche down. Maybe they're nervous about what they feel like is constricting their options. But trust me, if you try to be that generalist, you'll constantly get pushed back into what you used to do. You'll constantly have people, I've had clients that had 18 years of accounting background. And because they couldn't articulate what they wanted to do now that they didn't want to be in accounting, they were too general. And every person they talked to said, well, all of your skills point to accounting, so why don't you do that? Well, because I don't want to do that, but that's not enough. You need to know what you do want to do. So your old story is why you were there. Everybody has a story for where they are, why they're there. It might not be the most compelling story, but everyone has a story. I went to college for this. After college, I got my maybe internship or first job in the industry. They offered me a full-time role. It kind of evolved from there. 8 years later, I look around and all of a sudden, here I still am. I didn't really plan it. It's not a compelling story, but it's a common story. Maybe it could be, well, I graduated with this degree. I couldn't find anything in that field, so I took what I thought was a temporary job, at this thing, and then temporary turned into 12 years. That's a common story too. There's lots of these common stories that often involve, again, sort of passively taking what's in front of you. The new story is a combination of why you left there and why you're here now in your new field, new industry. Those things connect. So I'll tell you the reason, because there's a very specific story about why I got into career coaching. And there's this anecdote that goes back to my time in sales recruiting, because I had already, within the sales world, worked a lot in the recruiting and kind of HR sections. I was a really good team builder, so I would be flying all over the country, helping recruit sales teams and build out and train those sales teams. And I had someone send me a resume. It was not someone applying for a role. It was a friend of a friend, and they were really struggling with getting anyone to respond to their resume. They were applying to hundreds of jobs at the time, and nobody was responding to them. They were getting nothing. So this mutual friend said, you know what, talk to John. He does this for a living. He looks at resumes all the time. He'll tell you if there's anything wrong with your resume. So he emails it to me. I look at it, and the resume's fine. Bright young man. But there was a problem. He'd emailed me the resume. And when he was asking his friends and family for advice, he handed them paper copies. When he sent it to me, he emailed it, which means I saw what his email address was. And it's burned into my head forever. So again, this is not my email address at all, but it was ghetto big booty lover 69420 at hotmail.com. And that's burned in my memory forever. And he didn't know. He was, I think, 14 when he made the email address, never changed it. And he legitimately didn't realize that when he sent someone an email that they could see his email address. He thought it would just show his name. He didn't realize that he'd see that. So he'd sent this resume to hundreds of recruiters. No one responded back. I obviously told him what was wrong and he fixed it, no problem. Here was what got me into career coaching. I was furious at the hundreds of hiring managers that had all rejected him, had all put him into the trash folder, and not one could send him one email and say, hey, by the way, look at your email address. Not one. The just sort of cowardice that existed there. And I thought, poor people, these poor job seekers, they're lost. And nobody is telling them what's behind the scenes. Nobody is telling the stories. I've got to do something about it. And that day, I started moving into this field. I started doing professional training, and I started doing professional boot camps, and I started doing career coaching. But you'll notice there's my story, why I left, why I'm here now, and they connect. And that story creates a narrative the other person can connect with. It's not just, oh, I was annoyed by my old job, so I need to do something new. I drew a thread that gave me a personal, real reason to want to switch industries, to come over, something the other person can latch onto and say, this person's serious. This person is serious about moving over here. So look at that for yourself. Why do you want to leave? What frustrates you, annoys you, maybe even infuriates you about the environment you're in now? What do you want to do about that? What do you want to do to change those things, to change how your career life balance is structured, how other people's might be? What is the new thing you want to do? Because if you don't have a compelling reason to want to do that new thing, then changing your industry is not going to be any different. You're going to end up in the same type of job overall, the same type of role overall. The grass truly is greener, or the grass truly, that's saying the grass is greener. That's true, unless you change the way you're taking care of it, unless you change what you do. So you need to create that story. So I do a little chat polls. I like to see just kind of how this is resonating, partially because everyone's on mute. So sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself and I want to make sure that I'm not. So real quick, give me a yes or no in the chat. Have you struggled with this? Have you ever struggled with articulating your own career story, talking about why? Okay, I see a lot of yeses pop up, and this is true from my experience. It's true from the people I've interacted with. It's tricky, and I just saw a comment. Yes, it's quite long. Sometimes that can be tricky too. Is if you feel like, how am I telling you? If there's all these different elements, how do I tell the whole story? Because obviously, I'll tell you the secret. My career story is significantly longer and more complex than just, I used to work in medical device sales. Here's this one anecdote. Now I'm a career coach, right? There's more twists and turns to that story. But that's the example of the truncated short version, the elevator pitch version, so that you can get an idea of who I am, why I'm here. There's more to it, but if I'm speaking with somebody that's interested in that, we'll get to it. It doesn't have to all come up front. Just knowing that little bit of my story that you have a good impression of who I am. The rest will support that. Okay, so let's say we've reached this point and you've done some self-reflection. You've asked yourself some really difficult questions. Maybe you've had trouble asking yourself those questions. So you've sought out somebody else. This is something that everybody on our team at Amlavita does with clients, is help ask those questions, help articulate that story. So you've put in that work, whether it's by yourself, whether it's with a coach, you've put in that work. And now you're ready to make a transition. You have a target. It is possible that you're going to veer off target a little bit. It's possible that you think you're going to do one thing and you're going to do something adjacent. That's okay. The point is, instead of having all of this, is that you're focused on something. What do you bring versus what do you leave behind? So if you've had 5, 15, 25 years in a career, you've done some things you're proud of. I hope you've not gone 25 years in a career and have nothing you're proud of, but you have some things that you're proud of. You have some things that you've built. One of the things that I like to tell people is, if you build a house from scratch, you've never built a house before, and you decide, I'm going to learn how to build a house, you go out, you get all the materials, you study, you grab books, you learn how to build a house and you build it. And the very second you put the last nail in the last board and your house is done, a hurricane sweeps through and completely levels it. You are not back to square one. You have not lost everything, because you still know how to build a house. That's something that hurricane couldn't take away from you. So if you have 25 years in a particular career and you don't want to do that thing anymore, you're not starting over at ground zero, because you are going to carry some things with you from that. You're going to carry, if you achieved some sort of prestige, respect, as just a really great professional, that carries over. Because if people respect you as a professional, that goes beyond just the skill set. Again, I'll use the accountant as an example. If you are really respected as a fine professional in the accounting world, even if you stop being an accountant, if you stop being in the finance world, you still have that respect as a professional. That goes beyond just the skill set. That goes to your work ethic. That goes to your professionalism. Those things carry over. If you have accomplishments, if you have awards, everything from, the Employee of the Month award hanging at the Chick-fil-A wall, all the way up to, huge awards for industry mastery, things like that, those still matter, even if they're not in an industry or skill set, because again, they speak to your ability to rise to a higher level. They speak to your ability to drive yourself beyond the average. They are relevant things. So don't think that, I have 20 years of these great awards and I'm proud of it. There's all these things sitting on my shelf and on my wall, but they're all from this industry I'm leaving. No, that still matters. Even people in other industries, they absolutely care about those things, because again, it just speaks to you. Same with references, right? If you've worked with someone and they give you a glowing reference as a peer, as a mentor, as an employee, whatever your interaction was, that carries over. Don't think that, I have all these people that will write me letters of recommendation or who endorse me on LinkedIn, but they're all from my old industry, so they won't matter. No, they 100% matter. Still reach out to them. Reach out to them for letters of recommendation. Reach out to them for the endorsements, because that still shows you can work with a team, that you can impress people, that people want to work with you, regardless of what skill set you choose to practice, that people want to work with you and want to be on your team. Those things carry over no matter what. Now, what do you want to leave behind? These are the chains that a lot of people refuse to let go of. And as a result, they hold themselves back. Some people bring way too much assumed authority, right? Maybe they were a subject matter expert, an authority in their own field, and they expect, therefore, that in the new field, people are going to immediately defer to them, or that they're immediately going to have to, or going to be able to impose those kind of judgments. That's an area where you do have to be prepared to take a step back and say, I'm not the subject matter expert yet. My accomplishments are high, my prestige is high, I am skilled in general, but I'm in a new industry, I got to learn the ropes. I might be able to have a sharper learning curve than most because of my background, but if you come in with that authority, you're going to push people away. That's where people are going to say, this person doesn't, they think they're still at their old job where they were whatever. They don't want to come learn the new rules. So you have to leave that ego behind. You can't come in and say, I was the big fish in my old world, so you should treat me like I'm the big fish here. In many ways, whether you're doing this at 5 years into your career, 40 years into your career, you're the new kid. And the new kid advances farther by dropping the ego, making friends, learning a lot. The other thing I see a lot is assumptions. I guarantee you, if you've been in one job, honestly, I think for even a few years or more, so let alone for 10 or 20 years, you've been in one industry or even one role, you have certain assumptions about how every role works based on what your world looks like. Even if you move from one company to another in the exact same industry, they're going to do things differently. They're going to have different terms for things. They may even have different job title responsibilities. So you move into a new company and they give you a task. You say, oh, well, in my old company, this was the responsibility of wherever. So you're shocked. That's the assumption. Other companies do things so differently. I'll tell you my assumption. The first leaving medical advice, very corporate, very suit and tie. And I left it and I started working for a startup. And when I first went to my first meeting with the CEO to interview, which first off, that was a shocker for me, interviewing with the CEO, because I had come from this company that had 140,000 people and you would never speak to the CEO ever. And here I am with the CEO, and I show up in a suit like I assumed you would, because that's the world I came from. And the CEO is in a t-shirt and jeans and sandals and a baseball cap because it's a startup. And I mean, he busted my chops. He made fun of me a little bit for showing up in this suit, because he said, hey, read the room. Not only just look around and what do you see here, but look on our media, look at our webpage, look on all of our pictures on LinkedIn or whatever. You don't see anybody in a suit. You see people in t-shirts. So I had made an assumption. I had made an assumption that, of course, you wear a suit to an interview, because that's the world I came from. That assumption, I'm thankful to say that that particular mistake did not cost me that opportunity, but those kinds of mistakes are things that hold you back. So it's very important to separate. Most people, what they do is they either put everything in one bucket or everything in the other bucket. They either try to bring everything, including their ego, including their assumptions, or they try to leave everything, including their accomplishments and their prestige. And as a result, they either chase people away or they simply don't get anybody's attention. It's very important to separate these two things into these buckets. Now, kind of in a similar line, right? So that's a little bit more soft skill style. A little bit more hard skill style is, what skills can you bring and what skills do you not bring? So you are going to have certain very transferable skills if you are a professional, no matter what. Some things always leadership skills transfer, general tech savviness transfers. You will be amazed at how many different programs, different CRMs, things like that are 99% identical and have maybe a slightly different labeling system or something like that. So the terms can seem confusing and can seem daunting, but in reality, you spend 15 minutes with it and you're mostly up to speed. So how do you find out what are the differences there? Well, I do a little research project, and this is something you could take with you. This is something that's very easy to do. It requires no intricate knowledge of a new industry. So it's a really great starting point. If you are looking at a new industry, a new world, do a little job search, find some job postings, right? Go to any job board. Normally I hate job boards, but they're good for this kind of research. And just find, let's say, 10 to 20 job postings in the new industry. You don't have to have any specialized knowledge or anything like this. Just search for them, pull them up. Don't apply to them. You're just going to look at the text. And what you're going to look for is that requirements section, where every job ad is listing, what do you need to know? What do you need to be able to do? And across all 20, you're going to look for anything that appears 15 or more times, maybe all 20 times. Those are going to be the important skills in the industry. Some requirements are only going to appear once or twice out of 20 job ads. Those are probably more specific to one company. Maybe they're not even that important, but this is a great way to discover, what does the industry actually care about? Because if you're not familiar with an industry and you look at only one job posting, it's going to list, let's say, 10 requirements. How do you know which ones are real requirements, which ones are nice to haves, which ones you could get around? So look at a big net, cast a wide net, look at whichever ones appear the most. So take the top 5 items that appear most often among those 20 job ads, and those are the things that now you need to drill down on. Now you just go over to Google, right? Start finding out those things. If it's software you haven't used, learn it. If it's software you haven't used, I guarantee you there's a $40 1-week course to learn it, maybe even a free 1-week course to learn it. If it is a particular area of expertise you have in the past, if you've been working for a while, you may have something very, very transferable. So something says, we look for somebody that has 5 years management experience in this industry. Well, you don't have 5 years management experience in this industry, but you have 15 years management experience in your old industry. You think none of that transfers? You think there's no way to create a compelling narrative that explains how those 15 years might translate into 5 years in the new one? Do you think it's very different, leading people in one industry to another? So on those top 5, now you're going to start creating for yourself those stories like, okay, why do I have this? What's my explanation for, do I have this? And if you do that and you say, I genuinely and legitimately don't have this particular area of expertise, then the next step is, how do I get there? What can I do in the short term, in a month, 2 months, that can really bring me up to speed on that skill set? So looking at the same thing with tools, again, software tools, they seem so daunting if you're not familiar with that world, if you've never seen it, but please watch the 1-hour YouTube video on that software. You're halfway there. But now here's the other critical thing. We just made a list of things you don't have, or things you may have to figure out if you have. What do you have that other people don't have? When I was in the sales world and working my way through into recruiting, what I brought to the table and what I made as part of my compelling narrative was I made it very much a positive that most other people in recruiting didn't have sales experience, and that it was a huge benefit that I did, because it meant I understood pipeline, I understood process, I understood how important it was to stay on top of all of these follow-up points. I understood all of these aspects of pipeline management, because I saw there was a lot of similarities, but I saw that most people in recruiting came from an HR background, so they didn't really have a background that gave them pipeline management skills, whereas I did as a salesperson. And so I created that compelling story. Like, listen, if you want somebody who can manage a really high volume pipeline, not let anything fall through the cracks, make sure that everybody stays contacted, make sure all the follow-up happens, you need someone with a sales background. That compelling story brought me into that world. So in terms of what you don't have, hey, maybe there's people that have been in that industry for a while that have a few things you don't have, but you were bringing in some things they don't have too. You learned something in your time in whatever your previous industry or career was. You learned a lot of things, and those skills are not things that you're just going to drop by the wayside. Those are things that you're going to bring into your new world, and that diverse set of backgrounds is going to make that new team stronger. So again, I know this is something a lot of people struggle with. So another, just kind of tap into the chat, make sure everybody's awake. Have you ever had trouble when you're looking at something new to do? Maybe it's not even a new industry thing, but just a new area of expertise, even in your current industry. Have you ever looked at the big wide range of things to do and had trouble figuring out what to focus on? Trouble figuring out, where to point the laser, and what say, oh, there's, even in the new industry, there's 50 different roles. What should I do? And this is, I hear this a lot. The reason I ask this question is I hear this a lot, right? I hear people say, I know I want to do this at a high level, right? I've had people say, I know I want to work in social work, but that's big, that's a big tent. What do I want to do? How do I focus? Yeah, I said I get discouraged from overwhelming things. Yes, you see so many options. We call it, analysis paralysis. And one of the reasons that happens is we start to think, not that I'm making one right choice, but I'm making 99 wrong choices, right? We're thinking about not just am I picking the right thing, but am I saying no to the wrong 100 other things that might be out there? So this is something where, yeah, sounding board is so helpful. The good thing is nothing is written in stone, right? Again, it's that building a house. If you make a major career transition, and when you get to the new thing, it isn't perfect, pivoting again is so much easier, because you've built the machinery in your life and your career to make that transition. What does that machinery look like? All right, so now let's get into some tactics, right? Some tips and tricks here to really help you push into that space. So you've assessed, you've either done it by yourself, you've worked with someone else, you've assessed kind of what you want to do, what your initial target is. Now you've done the work separating out, making lists of what you want to bring with you, what you need to learn. You're prepared internally. Now it's time to interface with the rest of the world. How do we do that? So I'm bullet point number one, because it's so important. This is so important that if you only remembered one thing from this whole seminar, I mean, this would be it, is the incredible, incredible power of informational interviews. Some people are daunted and scared by informational interviews. Please, please, please do not be. And I'll tell you why. People on the other side love them, right? People, they reach out to me and because they're thinking about coaching or they're thinking about career development in general. They just say, hey, I'd love to pick your brain about what it's like being a coach. And I love it. I love it for a variety of reasons. First off, no one's immune to a little ego boost. When you reach out to someone and you say, hey, I'm really, really interested in the world of publishing. And so I'm looking for experts in the world of publishing, people that I can learn from, people that I can find out more about what it's like. And you're the person I found. How great does that feel to them? Like, wow, that's kind of an I made it moment for them too, as they're thinking, I've now established myself so strongly in my chosen vocation that other people are seeing me as that expert. So it's great. So right off the bat, you've started off on the right foot. You usually get very unbiased opinions because they have no agenda. It's not a job interview where they have to screen you. So you can really direct the conversation. You tend to get a much higher response rate. Nothing's 100%, but you apply blindly to 100 jobs, you might get 3 responses. You apply blindly to 10 people and just ask them for a chat, you get 4 to 6 people that say yes. So it's really a great way to just get a lot of information. But more than just the information you're getting is you're starting to build these connections with people in the industry. Now, I'm going to give you the most powerful question to ask in an informational interview universally, regardless of industry. Because all of you may be looking at different industries, so you're going to look at different people to target for this. But the one question 100% of you should be prepared to ask kind of near the end of your informational interview is, hey, thank you so much. This was super great. I'm so grateful for your time. Who else should I speak to? Based on our conversation, the things that you've told me, the things I've told you, who else do you think I should reach out to? Because the person you're talking to now knows 100 times as many people as you do in that industry. So you've reached out to somebody in publishing and they work in one aspect of publishing. You discover over the course of your conversation, maybe that's not the aspect of publishing you want to work on. And you talk about why, you talk about what your goals are, and you say, hey, given the differences between what you do and what I was aiming for, who do you work with that is closer to that? Or who do you know that is an expert on that? Say, oh, you've got to talk to Mary. She works over here in this publishing house. She does exactly what you're talking about. Her and I talk every once in a while. I'll introduce you. You followed that thread. That person is a connector. Don't ever let there be dead ends in your life. Don't ever let there be dead ends in your career search. Whenever you're talking with somebody, whenever you have someone who's willing to engage with you, ask for who the next person you should reach out is. So professional associations are kind of like a broader version of that. If there's a professional association in your new industry, join it. If it costs a ton of money to join, you can maybe hold off, but sign up for the newsletters. Go to any free events they have. If it's $40 a year for a membership, pay it. Right? You could join the professional association. It's not just for networking. It's also to show other people that you're serious. If somebody's making a transition from many years in one industry into a new industry, and they're willing to become a member of that professional association, that tells me they're more serious. That makes me take them more seriously as somebody to engage with. So that's something to respect. There are lots of adjacent or transitional roles. So I mentioned publishing because it kind of relates to this story. Someone I had worked with, she worked in marketing in the consumer packaged goods space. She didn't like it for a variety of reasons. And she really wanted to be, truly wanted to be a writer, wanted to be a columnist or a novelist. And making the transition to going from marketing to finding a magazine that would give her a column or anything like that was a little tricky. So she did a transitional role, which was she found a marketing position for a magazine company. So now that was an easier win for her, right? Because it's 100% of her resume applies. It's all marketing. She got that job very easily, but now look at where she is. Now she's adjacent to all of these people that are where she wants to be. She's talking with authors and editors and publishers all the time. And it's a lot easier to move from, marketing director for a magazine company to writing a column for one of their magazines. That's a lot easier of a transition. So sometimes you take those transitional roles. So look for those. Look for things that may be what you currently do, but closer, or even the same industry, but a different role that's closer than the role you want. Big career transitions don't always have to happen in a single step. They can happen in these sort of 2 or 3 step process. The second step, contacts. Every one of you has a contact list. You've got your LinkedIn connections, you've got the people in your phone, you've got an email list. You know these people. On average, it's maybe 100 people. Maybe it's 200. Maybe some of you 1,000. But on average, it's 100, 200. But if every person on average knows 100 people, then one, let's call it generation out, 10,000 people, because each of your 100 people knows 100 people. So if you think of who you have access to by just asking one question of, hey, does anybody in my network know of somebody who works in whatever? So instead of saying, does anybody in my network work in publishing? You say, does anybody in my network know anyone who works in publishing? And suddenly the framing of that question pushes out the bubble significantly in terms of gathering information, finding those sparks for the informational interviews. And then lastly, look for actual organizations that may straddle both your old and your new industry. There are many organizations, if somebody, you want to make the transition from web design to organic dairy farming. Okay. Well, maybe there is an organization that creates websites for the agriculture industry. Look for that. Look for that organization that may straddle both, so that you can maybe start working with that organization, whether it's a volunteer organization as a job, and sort of make those connections and move in. So these are all doors. These are all potential doors into your new world. It's not a giant wall. People look at a new industry and they think, oh, it's totally impenetrable. It's a complete monolith. It is not. There are so many doors into that new world. Many of the people in that world did not start there. Many of them transitioned. So there's lots of ways to find these pathways in if you're willing to go out there and ask. The last thing to think about as you're making this career transition is, again, let's go back to that very first concept of your career has to serve your life and not the other way around. So as you're doing all of this, take a step back and make sure that you're not just rushing through the motions and rushing through the career transition part, trying to get it done as quickly as possible, saying, I'm completely measuring success by whether or not binary, I have a job or I don't in my new industry. So many people make that mistake. They say, if I have a job in the new industry, no matter how bad it is, or no matter how much it's not serving these other things that are important to me, I'm counting it as a success. And they say, if I can't get a new job in the industry, or the industry I initially chosen, I'm going to rate myself as a failure and I'm not going to be able to sleep at night. Step back. Don't do it that way. Make sure you're looking at your life and the life that you want, and that you're making choices based on what serves that life. Are you making choices that give you a career path that lets you learn what you want to learn, that lets you work with who you want to work with? Forget about the job. What's the team like? Forget about the skills you already have. What skills do you get to learn? What do you want to be able to say about yourself in 10 years? What new things do you want hanging on your wall? And will this give you the opportunity to get them? Don't just transition to a new career for the sake of it. Don't let that push reason take over your life. Don't transition just because you hate where you are, and so you'll do anything, and then you sort of let the rest of the world tell you what new thing to do. Where you let someone else say, oh, well, this industry's hot, or this industry's prestigious, or this industry pays well. You have to step back and say, what do I want? What does my ideal life look like? And then think, is the person who's living that life going to work here, or then work here? Are they going to be in this industry or this industry? Make sure you're making those choices. When you are trying to transition careers because you are not working right now, or you're miserable at work, the pressure's on you. I know that. I know the pressure is just hanging down on your shoulders. You feel like everything has to happen now. But these questions, these things, not only are important, but you don't have to spend 6 months on them. Most people spend 0 time on these. So if you even spend a month, 2 conversations, a few evenings, taking the time to push everything else away, say it's okay if I'm not on a job board tonight, I want to do this instead, you're going to set yourself up for so much more success as you go. Now, this has all been internal, right? What's the other person here when you're talking to them? Because now, let's say we've gone through all these steps and it's led to something, right? It's led to a real interview. Maybe an informational interview sparked a more serious conversation. Maybe you got introduced to someone. Maybe you found the opportunity that you're really looking for. You crafted a great application. You found yourself communicating with somebody. Now you've got to put them into that story. You have to help them understand everything we've talked about. Because if you let them assume, they're going to assume you into your old box, which means if all of your materials that are visible online, your resume, your LinkedIn, if it all points to your old life, they'll assume you into your old life. If you don't create compelling narratives about why you want to change, then they won't know that you want to change. Other people don't know anything except what you tell them. And that's difficult for us to wrap our heads around sometimes, because every person on this call is a deep, intricate, three-dimensional person with incredible history and so much nuance. And another person cannot get that without years of a relationship with you. And in most cases, you have hours in these kind of contexts. So you have to find a way to give them the clues to get where you want to go. You have to be able to talk about your path, talk about your story. That story of me and the young man with the resume and the email address and working in workforce development, that's my shortened version of the story. That's the story I'm going to tell somebody that only has 10 minutes with me, because it's the story that succinctly summarizes my motivation to be where I am. Is that the only thing that's ever happened to me? No, of course not. If you want to tell the whole story of my life, like any of you on this call, it's going to be a volume this thick. It's going to be thousands of pages, but you can't tell them thousands of pages. If you let them assume into the gaps, they're going to assume the wrong thing. They're going to try to pigeonhole you. They're going to try to box you, and not maliciously, of course. It's just that's where they go. Everybody tries to sort of categorize every new piece of information they get, whether it's a person, whether it's a fact, whether we try to fit it into the context of what we have. So you have to create a narrative that overwhelms your past narrative. That can mean if you have a resume and it has 3 pages of agency marketing experience on it, and you don't want to be in agency marketing anymore, you might have to take that ego hit and cut a lot of that out. Yes, it tells a really great story of a very talented agency marketer, but that's not who you want to be. So if you tell that story, that's where people are going to put you. Make the other person a part of that story. Talk about why you want to be there. If you create these things, you're going to get people that want to be the next chapter in that story, that are excited. When I tell that story of the email address and why it's so important to me now to see these job seekers and help them, other people who also think that, other people in the coaching world who also want to do that, they are compelled to want to help me. They say, that's exactly right. I've encountered that before. I'm also frustrated by that. Let's work together. That's the connection. This is tricky. It's tough for us to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person and look back at us, because we have all this knowledge of ourselves. So it's tough for us to eliminate that knowledge. Have you ever struggled with imagining how the other person sees you, trying to figure out what's the other person thinking about me right now? Am I coming across right? This is something that from a coaching perspective, we do all the time. It's one of the advantages of being a coach and having that relationship with a coach, as opposed to like a friend or family member. You go to a friend and family member, you say, hey, listen to this story and read this and tell me what you think. The problem is they already know you. The problem is they already know all that deep background. A coach can be very objective. A coach gets to have that same sort of professional distance as a hiring manager, right? And can therefore give you that feedback. So listen, if you answered yes to all 3 of those questions, if every single one of those was yes, I've struggled with all of those, and I kind of illustrated why the relationship really helps work that, I've got a whole team of really phenomenal career coaches. This is my one plug before we do some Q&A. I've got a whole team of really, really great career coaches. Every anecdote I've told you is from my team. Every anecdote I told you here, all these other things are from people we've worked with, transitions we've helped happen. So if you answered yes to all of those questions, you struggle with each one of those things, you need some assistance with each one of those things, go ahead and grab, we have a free consultation. Go ahead and grab, if you put this link, and Jill, if you could throw this into the chat, because you can't click on it from the screen, but you can throw this into the chat. We put a lot of these resources out there for free, right? We've got, these webinars are always free, so please come join us on these. We have, our initial consultation with a coach is free. We even have for new members, your first session is on us. So there's a lot of ways to start building that relationship. So if you're looking at a transition, and you want to work with somebody that's seen similar transitions or has been in that industry or has worked with people in that industry, all sorts of things that can help you out, I really, really encourage you to get that consultation there. This is what we do. So I wouldn't be able to speak on this with this expertise for an hour if it wasn't what we do all day, every day. So now I'm going to open up to questions in the chat. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen here. There we go. And we're just going to open it up. So anybody in the chat, if actually, now that I've stopped sharing, I can actually see. You love that picture. The point. Thank you. I'm a big believer in very non-serious professional pictures. I do not believe in taking myself overly seriously. I think that life should be fun. So I like to be a little bit of a ham sometimes. I'm going to scroll through the chat here, and I'm going to grab some Q&A questions. If I won't get to every question. I'm sorry, but if I don't get to every question, hey, book a consult. I've got a whole team of people who all know these things in and out as well as I do. But let me kind of scroll through the chat a little bit here and see. I'm just scrolling through a lot of yeses, which I like to see. Shanti says, I grabbed onto the first job I could out of college, stuck in the same industry until life circumstance pushed me out. It's a common story. It's all over. So why would changing industries cause this to happen again? We often think that the source of all of our problems is the industry we're in. It's not always the case. I once spoke, one of my clients, she told me the industry she was in was terrible. She said, I hate this industry. It's all sharks. Everybody's horrible to each other. It's terrible. I need to get out. That sounds brutal. How long have you been in the industry? She said 9 years. So, wow. How many companies have you worked for in the industry? And she said 1. I said, well, then how do you know it's the industry and that's not just the culture of your company? And she never really looked around. So lo and behold, she starts doing some informational interviews with other people in other companies, but still within her industry. And it turns out that, yeah, externally, her company is the only one with that reputation. Everyone else says, oh, you work for XYZ. Wow, they're the worst. Like, oh, no, everybody quits there. No, but everybody. And she switched and went to a new company, but same role, same industry, was very happy. It's not always industry. And sometimes, likewise, we make these huge radical changes only to find out, hey, I'm still miserable. And I'm still miserable because it wasn't the industry, it was the choices that I was making about how I aligned my work with my life. It was about the kinds of bosses and managers that I find myself working under. It's because I wasn't critically evaluating the leadership of the company the way I should have. I was ignoring red flags of the leadership because I was, so caught up in the allure of the new industry. So it's not always that. That's why you have to be so intentional about these changes and about not just leaving for anything, but saying, why am I leaving? What is the new thing I want to do? What are the things that compel me to go there? And it might be, I want to work with people who care about X. And then suddenly the company doesn't matter. You're looking at people, you're looking at leaders. I want to work on a team that does X. Now you're looking for people. It doesn't matter what you do. So you have to know what your priorities are. And otherwise, it absolutely could do that. So I get discouraged from the overwhelming number of confusing tutorials. One of the problems of the information age, and it's a good, good problem to have. There's so much out there, which is great, but so much out there can cause some filtering issues, right? Like, oh, I want to learn this new software. I Google it. Turns out there's 400 videos. How do I know if any of them are any good? How do I help parse that? And that's something that it can be really great to have a second person helping with, because not only do you have the expertise of the coach, you also sort of get everything all of their other clients have gone through, right? You're not the first person to make a career transition. So you get all the tips and tricks and mistakes and stumbles that every prior client has gone through that now you get to avoid. So it's really helpful to have somebody to spit off. Oh, I see this, by the way, in the spirit of networking, if anyone's interested in networking, yes, please put your LinkedIn and things like that. This group, the group that's on this call, all have something in common, which is you all were willing to take an hour of your day and dedicate it to truly thinking about your career. That puts you in a fundamentally different category than a lot of people who never think about their career even once. They just sort of stumble from one thing to another. Generally speaking, if you share that trait in common, you're good people to network with, because guess what? Everyone's on this journey together. And as each new person at different points in the journey discovers new things, makes the transition successfully, finds a new opportunity, if you know each other, you get to share that knowledge, share those mistakes, share those successes, which is great not only for morale. When you're stuck and you haven't been able to do it, it can really help boost morale. If you see that other people are doing it, you say, okay, good, it's possible. It's not, the world is not terrible. There are people doing it. I just have to persevere. But it also can give you actual tactical advice. Say, this person joined company X and you congratulate them on LinkedIn. Then you realize, wow, company X is also exactly what I'm looking for. And I have a connection there now. So there's all sorts of reasons to be connected with each other. So let's see, share some advice on how to prepare that truncated elevator pitch story. Yes. In fact, I did a separate webinar on this. So I'll give you the very, very, very short version. Is I have a little method that I call the 3x3 method, which is 3 sentences, one about your past, one about your present, one about your future. The past story should talk about what you've done up to that point with a certain skill set. The present story should be about what you want to do, and the third sentence kind of connects you with that. So if you think about it in terms of those 3 sentences, and it can be 2 sentences each, right? But you're trying to keep it very short, is it creates a compelling arc of past, present, future, of like, here's me, here's what you want, here's us working together, that helps create something that the other person can immediately latch onto. Most important thing mind state wise to remember is that whatever you leave out of that story is not gone forever. It's just you're pushing it further down the conversational line. They're going to ask, right? If you start this conversation and you begin a relationship, they're going to ask these other things. You're going to get to still tell the other important parts, but you can't try to jam it all. It's like trying to write an entire novel, but fitting every word on the first page. At some point, things just have to move down the line. Laid off in 2008, how to get back in, even with a great resume after so long. So this is where you want to look for those transitional organizations that need somebody, right? Just because you've been out of work for a while doesn't mean that you don't have skills, and it doesn't mean that there isn't somebody that needs it. But you really hinder yourself if what you're trying to do is immediately step into the top level thing as if there was no break at all. The transitional material, right? The volunteer opportunity or whatever, it can be a 1 month, 2 month thing. I think a lot of people are scared of starting back a step because they think, I'm going to get stuck there for 3 years. No, go volunteer for a month. And now you've met people, you've refreshed everything, you have some recency back to it. And that lets you refine your story in terms of talking about what you did during that time. There's tons of stuff in that era. And this is a deep question, by the way. It's actually a really great coaching question, because even in all of those years, you did things. Like you said, supporting your husband's job. There's a lot of things in there. Just because it wasn't a strict employee relationship job doesn't mean there was nothing there. So this is something that you and a coach could really work into and build a resume entry out of that. How to portray a long-term job you didn't like. Well, you don't necessarily have to say you didn't like it. Again, talk about the pull reasons. Here's what I want to do, the positive impact I want to make that was not possible here. I value my time there. I learned a lot. You always learned a lot if you didn't like something, right? Because you do. I learned a lot. Here's the positive thing I want to do now. That's it. You don't have to worry about what happened in the past, why you didn't like it, because that's what you're focusing on. You're focusing on the future. Okay, there's a lot of other questions on here, and I apologize. I want to respect everybody's time and also Jill's time. It's 3:01. If there's questions we didn't get to, which I'm sure there are, these are all coaching questions, right? These are phenomenal questions. Remember that half an hour phone call with the coach is free, right? So if you want to ask these questions and get them in a way that's meaningful to you individually and not just me spouting off 30-second answers as quick as I can on a webinar, we are all here to help. We are here to help as much as possible. These things really do help inspire further web events like this too. So absolutely grab that link, grab a call with somebody. I've got a whole team of fantastic people, and we all want to help. That's it. That's my spiel for today. Oh, Jonathan. Oh, thank you. By the way, people said some really nice things in the chat. I really appreciate that. It was really positive feedback, and it makes me feel very good. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. Yes, I love positive chat boxes. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I'll be sending out the recording and recap later on. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and let us know. But I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.